So the descent into the madness had happened, and I had gotten my disability back pay, and I looked at my husband and I said, with this back pay, I am going to do this, and it would be really great if you joined me. But if you don't want to, I understand completely, because living with a terminally ill person is really, really hard, and it's absolutely got to be your choice. So you can either get onto the vehicle that I have purchased to go do this thing in, or you can stay here. I love you either way. Uh, that I was not fair to him at all. There's no way that was fair to him, even in a little, but luckily he loved me and decided to follow me across the country. So I set my criteria to this madness, as I wanted a vehicle that had an older engine, because I can work on those, something with a carburetor. Um, I wanted that engine to have low mileage if possible. I wanted the vehicle to be under X amount of feet, so that there were places that I, knew that I wanted to go, that I had to have, less than 23 feet. Um, I wanted it to, to appeal to those criteria, and make sure that I could do what I wanted to do with it, because it was important to me. At the time, I found it on an app called Let Go. It was in Cleveland, Ohio. As soon as I found it, I went and looked at it immediately, money in hand. I looked into her engine compartment, and she was so clean you could eat off her carburetor. And I fell in love. I knew that there was water damage to the coach. There was, a missing window. There were things. But none of that mattered to me. What mattered to me is that the engine had less than 50,000 miles on it. It was a 350. It had a carburetor that was gorgeous. It started, it ran, and it looked good. I had it gone over by, I had a mechanic go over it completely. But in the end, I paid the man $2,300 and drove off in it. For $2,500, I was road ready. I took a week to do all of the necessities, changed all the fluids, all the filters, checked all the hoses, replaced what was needed. We wound up having to replace the accelerator cable in all of that, and that was a nightmare, not from the auto parts store, but from the manufacturer. 9 boxes of the part were ordered. Of those 9 boxes, 7 of them had the correct part in them. Of those 7 parts, 3 of them were put together correctly. So, got to check all that stuff. But can't stress certified mechanic enough, because, without that, I wouldn't have known. So I had the mechanic go over it, top to bottom, and we replaced what we needed to, which was the accelerator cable and all of the fluids and all of the filters, and we put an air filter on her because she didn't have one, and we drove her to Louisiana to see one of my brothers. I spent 2 months there. On the way into Louisiana, we lost the alternator, so we replaced the alternator. We replaced the battery. We did another oil change. Made sure any of the hoses that looked questionable got serviced. And then we drove to Texas to see another brother. In Texas, I made sure that the rear tires were new. Now, mind you, on the way out of Ohio in the initial visit, we had to replace the drive tires, the front tires. So those are new. In Texas, we replaced the rear dually sets. So those are new. Then we drove to Colorado. Now, the plan the entire time was to go see both brothers and then come up to Colorado and drive around until I found a place I didn't want to leave, and I was going to die there. And that was the plan. I was fine with that. But what happened was I got into Colorado and I got super, super sick. So I wound up having to put the RV in storage and postpone all of the madness a little bit. But in putting the RV into storage, we and dealing with some doctors, at that point we found out that the thing in my head had doubled in size, and that they had much better odds at taking it out of my head because they had developed this cool technology to do it. And 5 years isn't a lot of time in the medical world, but hey, guess what? It's enough. So I decided to go ahead and let them do that. and the RV sat in storage for a year. They do the surgery. They break my face. They take what they thought was a cavernous hemangioma out of my head, but it turned out to be a schwannoma, so that is in fact the fourth kind of cancer that they have diagnosed me with. But now, all healing up. This is where they broke my face, went in behind the eye, and took the tumor out. I'm really lucky that that worked for me, and there is no trauma or, serious damage. Everything's working wonderful. I have better eyesight in that eye now than I did before. But at that point, 10 days after the surgery, I decide that I'm no longer dying, so it's time to do the thing. And 10 days after surgery, I go down and register the vehicle in Colorado and pull her out of storage, do a slight tune-up to her, and bring her up the mountain to find the place that I don't want to leave. At the point that we come up the mountain, we start the rebuild. At that point, we replace the heater core, the radiator, the water pump, thermostat, all of the hoses. We do a whole nother fluid change again with all of the fluids and all of the filters. She's got a new distributor cap. She's got all new wires. She's got everything. Beautiful, runs wonderful. Still less than 50,000 miles on the engine. And at that point, I'm living in her, which is not a problem for me because that's the lifestyle I choose to have. I believe at the end of this, it will make my life much, much better. And at that point, it's time to start the rebuild of the coach. So I rent a warehouse, and I put her in the warehouse, and I strip her down. And we strip her all the way down to the original G30 chassis that Chevy put out, which is a heavy-duty work van. So I've got the chassis and the original underpinning on it, and I take the underpinning and I glue it E6000 steel wool around all the existing holes, even the ones I'm going to reuse. And then I put down the original 2-inch insulation foam that they had on the floor. I put that back in, but I put it in around because when they built this coach, they gave me some lovely 2-inch square stock to work with, but it was a free floating frame. There were 4 pieces that were bolted, 2 bolts each, to the chassis. So I took all of this steel out and I cleaned it all up and made it all pretty, and I cut it together and we welded it, so there is now a solid 2-inch square stock welded frame bolted directly to the chassis. And then I filled all that with the insulation foam. I will go back from underneath and use the same spray foam to fill those holes to help hopefully keep moisture out of there from underneath, but I haven't done that at this point yet. What I have done is laid down 1/4-inch plywood. Now, I did not put any pressure-treated wood back into this, but there was so much water damage in it before, I decided to go a different route. I took all of the wood and I deck coated it. I used Ready Seal. I used 6 coats. I thought it was going to use 8 or 10, so I'm really pleased that I only used 6 coats. And I took a month to do it, days and days and days between each coat for it to absorb real well. By the time I went to put the 7th coat on everything, it beaded up instantly, so I just wiped it off and we were done. So 1/4-inch plywood down on the floor, put a piece of 2-foot steel flashing over all of the seams, so that if something does get into that floor, it has a harder time chewing up through the floor, I hope. Then I took 1-inch angle aluminum and I sandwiched that into a channel around all of that and screwed it directly to the steel frame. This is my subfloor. It's very solid. It is way more solid than the original subfloor that was in it. So at that point, I was ready to do what I'm going to call my system. I decided to go with a 1x2-inch channel of 6063 aluminum. It's used to make trailers and exercise equipment and stuff like that, so I knew it'd be strong enough. And I'm making ribs out of those, and that will be interconnected with a 1x2 wood subframing. just like it was before, except because of where I live, the winds are so high that I wanted something that was ultimately stronger than wood, and I wanted to be able to screw directly to that so that the exterior doesn't risk peeling off. Because we literally, my first year up here, my first winter up here, not my first year, but my first winter up here, we had a storm that was 120-mile-an-hour winds, sustainable. So, everything shut down for 3 days. And I want to be able to know or feel secure that that's going to withstand some of the winds that it's going to be in, because I live at 10,000 feet and those winds can get serious. So at this point, she's got her ribs up, and we're starting to put in the subframing and put on the outer skin. And that's where we're at this point.